Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics. This week's questions answered video. The question is, has my feeling on the NRA changed? So if you're new to the channel or you just didn't see it, this question is kind of regards to a video I did in the NRA about a year ago. Basically detailing my tumultuous relationship with the NRA as a lifetime member and how I felt they weren't doing the best job to represent all gun owners. And the question relates to that. And the simple answer is, my opinion is starting to change, but it hasn't changed yet. Background, so you don't necessarily have to go back and watch that video, but if you got time, you can check it out. It's deeper in the channel. What is my problem, or what was my problem, or what is my changing problem with the NRA? Well, the NRA, historically, the National Rifle Association, has been our largest lobbying group for gun rights. However, historically, they've not always represented everyone's idea of what the Second Amendment is supposed to be and what the Second Amendment's intent was based on the way the Founding Fathers wrote it and how they talked about what it meant in their other correspondence. In the 1920s, the NRA, through the National Revolver Association, supported the implementation of carry concealed permits in many states. Before that, you didn't need them. Basically, they wanted the government, you needed to have a government license in order to carry a gun for self-protection. During the FDR administration, the New Deal, the 1934 NFA, and the 1938 Gun Control Act, the NRA supported them. They went to the Supreme Court, and the NRA president at the time, Carl Frederick, and I'm going to quote him directly, "I have never believed in the general practice of carrying weapons. I do not believe in the promiscuous toting of guns. I think it should be sharply restricted and only under licenses." Now, granted, this was back in the late 30s. Not a huge deal, long time. Time has passed since then, right? Well, fast forward a little bit to 1968, the new Gun Control Act also had NRA support. The executive vice president at the time, Franklin Orth, and I'm going to quote him directly, "The measure as a whole appears to be one that the sportsmen of America can live with." That's the problem that I've had historically with the NRA, is they're more about, or they have been to a certain degree, more about representing the sportsmen than they are about people who own firearms for sports and self-defense, or just self-defense, period. Granted, this was 1968, so not too bad, right? Well, now we fast forward a little bit to 1986, the infamous year in which it became very, very difficult after that year. In fact, it became impossible to buy machine guns manufactured after that date once the amendments to the Gun Control Act were made in 1986. This bill did have NRA support, which is very troubling. Now, there was some backdoor last-minute additions to the deal that I want to say give the NRA the benefit of the doubt. They didn't necessarily know were going to be in there, and it did repeal a lot of restrictions that were more troublesome. So we traded a lot to get very, very little, and we've been dealing with the pre-86 ban since then. So all the way up into the late 80s, the NRA had a very troublesome relationship with gun owners who weren't necessarily just sportsmen. The NRA has always been big on heritage and big on hunting, and that's great because those are parts of our American heritage and those are parts of the gun community, but they're not the only part. Coming into the the mid-2000s, right around 2010 forward, the NRA started to reach out to and recognize the self-defense side of the market, even though I wouldn't say quote-unquote officially, at least not at the time. They did a really good job moving forward, but it felt like they just were kind of putting one foot in the water to see how it was because, well, I don't know the reason. I can only assume the reason. I'm not going to go too deep into assumptions on that. But anytime any kind of legislation came up, you still dealt with the problem of, is the NRA going to represent my rights to defend my life against anyone who means me harm or means my family members harm? On the training side, the NRA's training has been stagnant for a long time and it hasn't advanced, and I don't know why. Because the NRA being the largest lobbying group, the NRA and the ILA, the lobbying side of the NRA, they're a powerhouse, and they could be a powerhouse for training. Unfortunately, they just haven't gone that direction. But there's hope on the horizon, and that hope is we get to elect a new board of directors, and we have some really good people running for the board of directors. Think to yourself right now, even NRA member or not, can you name, not the president, not the executive vice president, can you name one person that's on the NRA board of directors? Is that not a problem? So I want to talk about Adam Kraut. Adam Kraut is a friend of mine. I've known him for a few years, and he's running for the NRA Board of Directors, which the ballots for the upcoming Board of Directors election go out in February in the NRA magazine. So if you're a member and you have voting powers, you're going to get a ballot. Why should you vote for Adam Kraut? Well, Adam's a lawyer. Obviously, don't hold that against him because he's a pro-gun lawyer, which isn't necessarily rare, but it's not as common as maybe we would like. Adam's also a manager of a gun store in the suburbs of Philadelphia. So he's involved in the shooting community, probably more so than a lot of other board of directors or people who sat on the board in the past have been, at least in all aspects of the Second Amendment community. So he's big into training, big into defensive shooting, big into NFA things. He likes machine guns like we all do, suppressors, all the cool guy stuff. But he also takes the legal side of things very, very seriously. If you do some research into Adam, which I highly encourage you to do, I think you'll find through his the law firm that he works for and just through his general involvement in the community that he's been involved in the fight against our encroachment on Second Amendment rights for a long time. Often with probably what I would consider a strict voluntary basis. He's not necessarily making any money to go out and do some of the things that he's done and file some of the legal briefs that he's filed and give opinions for the layman, because I didn't go to law school. I mean, I was a police officer, still am a police officer as a reserve, but I obviously don't understand the larger scope of the law as he does in regards to things like the NFA and being able to break down in layman's terms so everybody can easily understand it, what the government is attempting to do this time when they're encroaching on our rights. We just won, well, I'd say we, but the Second Amendment just potentially won a huge election. We'll have a Republican in the White House, but what's more importantly is we'll have control of Congress. But that doesn't mean it's time to just sit back and relax and wait for ammo prices to come down. And some people probably cry about the lowers that they spent more money on because they thought that we were going to end up with a very anti-gun president. Now is the time to double down on taking back some of the rights that we've lost. And the NRA is just one facet, one way that we can do that. The NRA is best positioned because they're the largest lobbying organization. Having people on the board like Adam will best represent the self-defense side of shooting, mainly because the hunting and the sports side is already really well represented. The NRA has done a better job in recent history of making inroads towards the more self-defense focused shooters, bringing on commentators like Colian Noir, Dom Rosso. They had Austin Weiss for a while. That's really good. But we need to put more self-defense minded individuals on the board of the NRA, which can help in a certain way drive the NRA's lobbying side, the ILA, to take a more aggressive stance, not just on the federal level, but state by state by state, because that's where the future battles are going to take place. And we're going to need the NRA support, and we're going to need people like Adam on the board of the NRA to help push and facilitate the fights in the state basis, like California has continually strip the rights of their citizens. And we can chuckle about that in Georgia, you can chuckle about that in Texas, but sometimes things that start in California push east. And states that want to implement gun control can use California as an example for their own states. We worry about the federal level a lot, as we should, but we need to start focusing more and more on the state level, and we're going to need the NRA to do that, and we're going to need people like Adam Kraut on the board of the NRA to help facilitate that. Because if you look, and I've already kind of laid it out, some of the troubling history the NRA had, that doesn't represent the NRA today, but it shows you that if it happened in the past, it can happen in the future if we're not careful with who we put on the board of directors of the NRA and who we vote into power in the NRA. So those of you that are members of the NRA, you got to take this election super seriously. We need the NRA to become more vocal than they already are, continue to become more vocal than they already are, in every facet of the Second Amendment. On the training side, the NRA, the law enforcement side of the NRA, training's amazing. It's a really good foundation for police officers to start with being instructors on that side. They do a really good job. The citizen side, not so well. Their training's been stagnant for a long time, and I think maybe some of that's due to fear of potential liability or something like that. But the more people we have like Adam involved in the NRA, directly involved in the NRA, not just being a member, but actually having a say in what the NRA does and where the NRA goes and certain inroads that they make, is going to better serve the shooting community as a whole. So I'm voting for Adam, and I highly encourage you to consider Adam as someone that you'd vote for if you are a voting member of the NRA. And if you're not a voting member of the NRA, if you're not a member of the NRA, even though I've had I've had my reservations sometimes about the NRA, or sometimes they've done things that have frustrated me. I have to understand a common sense point of view, and I mean the literal definition again of common sense, not the gun control aggregate common sense definition, that the NRA is going to be best suited to represent me more so than any other organization on a nationwide level. There's a lot of great local organizations state by state that also work with the NRA. But you'd be hard pressed to replace the NRA as a national spokesman. So if you don't vote, do vote. If you're not a member, join. Because coming into 2017, we're going to have the White House and Congress doesn't mean that it's time to take a break and relax. We need to use this 4 to 8 years to take back everything that they've taken from us in the past 8 years, in the past 16 years, in the past 24 years, so on and so forth. We need to go back and roll the clock all the way back to 1919. Take it all back. Constitutional carry, abolish NFA, suppressors for everyone. But it all starts with putting the right people on the board of the NRA to help facilitate that in legislation at the federal level and at the states levels. So again, third time, fourth time maybe, check out Adam Kraut and highly consider voting for him, because I'm going to. And normally I wouldn't shill for a person, and I don't consider this shilling, because I honestly believe that he's going to best represent the way I look at the Second Amendment, and I think the way that a lot of my viewers do too. I'm Aaron Count with Sage Dynamics. Vote accordingly.